Welcome to a new episode of the Life Career Roadmap with my special guest, Claudia Rondon. So, Claudia, welcome to this episode on YouTube and welcome.
Oh, thank you, Sema. Very nice to be here with you. We've been talking about catching up on this one for a long time. So just wanted to start by thanking you to invite me. Thank you for inviting me to be part of your life career roadmap.
Yeah.
It's a really dear word to me, roadmap, as I was working in strategy recently, so business transformation strategy, and we have been talking about roadmaps for quite a while.
Oh, that's so good. So now I'm very curious. Let's do it.
Yes.
So, Claudia, just acknowledge that you are in Sydney right now. And
I am in Sydney.
yes.
Yes.
So, my first question to you is tell us where you come from, Claudia. And, as well, you are Claudia in Portuguese, but in English, you are Claudia. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. In English, I'm Claudia, and it's Australian English, Claudia. But you know what? And this is a funny thing, right? Because in Australia, people tend to ask you, like, how do you pronounce your name? And by the way, I just really want to do a quick acknowledgement of the First Nations here. I'm actually in Manly Beach, and the Aboriginal name of this land is Guy Miguel people. So acknowledging present, past, and emerging. I think that's a really important thing to do, given that we're
That's
talking.
Right.
Yes, but back to the name. So yeah, Claudia in Australia, Claudia in England, or Claudia in Germany. I don't mind. So I often tell people, you know what, whatever works for you.
You can just like if people say Claudia, you look at anyway.
Yeah, make it. But
Where
yes,
you from? Where you from, Claudia? And what's your professional background?
Yes, I'm from São Paulo originally, and which is in the southeast of Brazil. Quite a large city. We've got probably, including metropolitan area, over 25 million people, which is roughly almost the same size of the Australian population, really. And I am a journalist by trade. Oops, bit of a noise here.
It's like São Paulo, baby.
São Paulo, but it's just Manly. You know what I mean? Like sometimes they have busy roads. But anyway, so all right.
That's right. It's part of the journey.
Sometimes people say, what happens in Australia? Only kangaroos. Like, oh, you know what? It's pretty peaceful here, but sometimes that's a bit of a different. So yeah, journalist by trade. I worked in journalism and public relations in Brazil for about 5-6 years, and then after that I moved to Australia. And then of course here in Australia I did a bit of a transition and ended up working as an independent producer, because I did my master's in production script writing, and independent script writer as well, and always like copywriter. And then from there ended up migrating, as I like to joke. I changed into advertising. So I started sort of like switching sides a bit and using my abilities in account management, in public relations, and I started using those to shift into advertising. And of course, the market changed, and social media gained even more importance, and then content management systems as well, e-commerce, and so on. And then I started diverting and into, okay, let's learn a little bit about digital production. Let's from an advertising point of view, and then let's learn a little bit about content management systems. And so I became an integrated producer, and then started learning about business operations and other things as well. And long story short, because we're talking about 15 years of this transformation, my latest role has been working as a senior strategist in the business transformation side of things, helping businesses figure out their problem statements and working with design thinking methodologies to help those businesses then understand how they want to fix what's not working, basically. And and that's been my latest assignment or mission. And and then surprisingly, after a few years, probably over a decade since I last did the coverage for television, I was invited to be the part-time foreign correspondent for Brazil's second largest TV channel, which was an absolute honor, super exciting, and I covered the FIFA Women's World Cup 2023.
Wonderful. That's great. So I know you for quite a while, and we have had so many great conversations and philosophies around. So, Claudia, but I want to go back to the time when you were growing up in São Paulo. So I want to know more about the decision of becoming a journalist, because in Brazil, you know, journalist is very strong, was a very fascinating profession that many people want to, but culturally, going to the traditional, let's say, professions was more appealing and more easier to go than journalism. So when was the time that you felt that journalism was something for you?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, because I actually spent most of my, you know, as you know, children, they change their minds about things, you know, quite a while. So quite a lot. And I went through a few different phases, which included, like, I want to become a professional figure skater. I want to become the president of Brazil. I want to become, yes, I know. I've changed my mind, you know. I don't regret that change. I can guarantee you that. And then, you know, I would love to become maybe a prosecutor, or I'm going to be a lawyer. So, you know, I went through a few different, you know, and then I realized, as of course, as you do all those tests when you're like coming to the end of your school time, before you get into university or vestibular in Brazil, you know, I was like, okay, but what is it that I really want to do? Like, I was like, oh no, I really want, for me, it was a lot about being useful to society and helping propel positive change. And whenever I used to talk about law, I was talking about law from the point of view of actually rewriting the law. So it's like, you know what, I would love to go and rewrite what is written and make something better. And
okay, you know, very naive thoughts.
Because as a teenager, of course, you think that, you know, oh yeah, I know it all. Like, so I know this very
I can
well.
change the world.
Just write the whole thing. I mean, who wrote this anyway? You know.
Yeah.
So and all, as if that was really the problem. And then later in life, you realize it doesn't really matter what's written.
It's just part of.
Anyway, it should. I think in Australia, it kind of does in a way. I have to say that, though. You know, people do seem to play a bit by the rules here in some ways. That is quite reassuring, and I think this is one of the reasons why I enjoy living in Australia other than living in other places. But so yeah, I then, when I was in that phase, I actually entered two different universities, and I ended up studying a little bit of law at one private university, and also studying journalism at the same time at another university. And I was, you know, my parents were obviously helping me out, which was really, really good. And so I didn't have to pay for my university studies, and they were doing that for me, which is very, very fortunate. And then they came to me and said, hey, young lady, by the way, you know, you're doing 2 degrees at the same time, literally at the same time. So you choose the class, history of art today at this university, where I was studying journalism, or, you know, legal writing or whatever on the other one. I was like, they're like, this is not gonna fly. So I'm going to give you a deadline. So you're going to have to make your Gemini mind about where you want to go and study, because seriously, this is not on, you know. And then I remember, like, you know, one of the activities that we did at university on my first year was we had to interview each other. And one of my good friends and colleague, who's also a journalist, she interviewed me exactly about this question, which is like, you know, why journalism? Why are you here? You know, why do you connect with this, etc.? And at the time, we were already studying linguistics, and I really got caught in this phrase, which was by Ludwig Wittgenstein. He's an Austrian linguist, and he said that the limit of my words are the limits of my language. And of course, I was already. Yeah, so for me, it was like I was already studying English, you know, and also Portuguese, of course, being my first language, and then Spanish. and French. And I've always had this interest for multiple cultures and multiple languages and multiple worlds, and the limitlessness or the lack of limit in a way, or this idea of expansion, of worlds, and I thought to myself, you know what? I think I much prefer the idea of journalism first, so I can expand before I can go and be more of help, punctually speaking, as an expert. I'd rather just be a generalist and expand those limits and learn all these worlds and learn multiple languages that are not necessarily just from different peoples or different countries, but metaphorically speaking, because we are all so different, right? So I thought, the limits of my world are the limits of my language, and I want to expand that. So that was the reflection that I did at the time, and I don't even know if this is very accurate, as I was 19 years old at the time. But that was where I sort of harnessed myself. Like, this is where I grounded myself in the decision of coming back to my parents and saying, by the way, I've decided I want to be a journalist, and I want to communicate, and I want to exchange this, this expansion of myself, and then the world, and so on. And my parents were looking at me and saying, okay, but you've always said that you wanted to study law, and I'm like, yeah, but guess what? I've changed my mind
again.
And of course, I also, I had an agenda, which was, at the time, I also already had traveled overseas to the UK as a student from university. Not from university, sorry, from school. So in my last year during my last year at school, my parents sent me over to the UK to study English in Cambridge, just as a holiday, to improve my language skills. And then I, of course, made new friends there, new Brazilian friends and new English friends. And then one of those friends later became my husband, with whom I traveled to Australia in 2808. And of course, my ex now. So not of course, but yeah. But anyway, that's the whole story, sort of like, putting it. So you asked me about childhood, and I just gave I gave. So
this question of getting to know people in UK and Brazilians and English. So did you also live in UK with your ex-husband, or was something that you met him there, and then when you decide, guys, to get together, so you came to Australia? How was the story?
Oh, we did live in the UK, yes, and yes, and of course, then that was my first experience as someone truly living overseas, because previously I was just on a little student holiday, traveling the UK and traveling Europe, and but then the literally 20 years ago, in 2003, this is when I went to the UK to live for about a year or so. Yeah, and I studied there and met lots and lots of people. And of course, this is when, again, the real expansion that I was talking about, because I was at university at the time. I took a leave of absence for a whole year. Had a couple of friends of mine who were from university who were also there, journalists. And then one of them was studying film. The other one did some studies in film as well. And of course, those two guys ended up working in that industry. And I myself ended up doing my first presenting work over there at that age. And so I interviewed at the time for a Brazilian TV channel as a junior correspondent. I interviewed musicians who were playing over there, and there was a recording company that's quite well known, and a few musicians that were also quite well known in London, Brazilian ones. And I ended up interviewing them. for a couple of different projects. Then I ended up, finding people who were doing journalism as well, like magazines that were bilingual. And I was a student, so obviously, it's still a student role, so you're not working full time, none of that. But the experience as a 20-year-old, kind of finding your way in an international environment, and then you learn a lot of things, and you meet all sorts of people, and including people who are taking different pathways. Oh, I'm going to study this or study that, or I'm going to try and get my citizenship based on my European citizenship based on my grandparents, or this and that. You start hearing all those stories. Oh, maybe I'll transfer my university from country XYZ into this country, or maybe I'll quit that university and do another university. So
all the questions.
all those typical questions, and of course, back in the day, well, one thing I do remember in the UK back in those days, I remember very, very often there were conversations about students who were working more than they should, doing work at say bars or pubs or cafes, etc. And on Oxford Street, the Home Office, which is the immigration, let's say, they would run past and then take people. I think that was a thing that people used to talk about back in the day. I don't know what it's like at the moment, but and I was not part of that, thank God, and I made sure to stay clear from that. I guess I was also fortunate that I didn't feel like I had to do any of that, but yeah, that's when, I think, and also the UK is a very particular place, I suppose, with the proximity of other countries from Europe,
countries.
Yeah, so it's a very different environment. So when I came to Australia, one of the things that I did actually agree with my ex was that my life was going to be different to the life that I had in the UK, because obviously, I mean, I had already had experience working in Brazil, and the decision of coming over here was already based on skills and demand. So we were invited to actually come over here because of the skills, and my plan was to do my master's anyway, so we were more structured. But one thing I was like, I don't want to hear any of those this, that, and the other. And I was like, well, guess what, I came here in the end, you get involved in the community and this and that and the other, and guess what, everybody, conversation starts again, because you've moved countries, and then you need to find your niche, you need to find yourself, you need to find your community, and what is your community, and why do you need your community, what the hell is community in the first place?
That's right, sir.
What does that mean? Is it good or is it bad? Or and why does it? So and the comparisons. Oh, because back in Brazil, we used to do these. Oh, because and this is the kind of conversation that is very common when you're new to a place, because you enter this zone of really like getting all these different impressions, and we learn by comparison, and we have this process of association. So you go, oh yes, and this is how you memorize things, but sometimes that comparison, which is like, it's never going to be a proper comparison, because guess what, this is this and this is that. Oh, because the beach in Brazil, guess what?
Apples.
The beach in Portugal, the beach in Cyprus, the beach in Bali, the beach whatever you want to find, the amazing adorable sand dunes somewhere else in the world, they're all particular to that environment. So your experience by the beach in Australia, it's never going to be the same as in New Zealand, and it's never going to be the same as in Brazil, because there's a context of it. And so my thing was like, the best thing that you can do is to just enjoy your presence. And when you're here, it's here. And when you're there, it's there. And there's no comparison, because like you said, it's like you can't compare.
Did you have, sorry, this interrupting you, did you have this consciousness back there, or everything was overwhelming again? Because one thing is moving to UK, where you had been before, you had done, despite it was a holiday school, English school for you, and then coming as leaving someone and having the day by day, moving to Australia and having it first different environment, different weather, different perspectives. So what was the most difficult situation for you moving to UK and get adapted to the first time moving away from home seriously, or coming to Australia after having that knowledge from UK? How was the experience for you? What was most the difficult thing for you, or the shocks that you got, or the roadblocks that you got in front of you?
I guess, I mean, it's kind of like, it's like one of those things. Like once you've done something once, you think that
You know.
you like the pause there.
Yeah.
You go, you know,
It's easy.
it's easy. I mean, you know, this and that, the other, same language, whatever, same deal, you know, no. Well, I mean, again, once again, comparison circumstances were significantly different. Like I was in my 20s, and then this time around, I was like, I was in both ways. I was in my 20s, but like early 20s,
This
late.
is in the end of
Yeah, and so turning 30s, I suppose. But I guess, was it hard? Was it difficult? It was definitely, you can always remember a few. There are a few basics that you can remember from the experience of having been in a different environment. I think the thing about the language here is definitely something that comes to play. The more you understand the language, the more it's easy for you to understand the nuances of the environment where you, because language is not only about the words, it's also about there's so many layers of meaning to a word, and then I love this. There was an article on the BBC a while back where they discussed like how in certain languages they have multiple words to mean the same word, really. So for example, and I got caught on this one for a number of reasons, but the word love, or the verb to love, in Dutch, they do have it in different, like this, they use it differently, and it's all love, but and even like
levels of love, and the way when you say them, right, is the occasion and you say it. And probably I don't know Dutch, but it's the same, probably the same as in Spanish, because in Portuguese you say love as love in English, but in Spanish when you say love it's just because you like it, but when you say te quiero, it's when you love it. Exactly. So it's like
go figure. So with all of that in mind, here's the first mistake. You're like, oh yes, I know English very well, I'm gonna move to Australia, the same language should be all right. No.
Point.
I mean, of course it is the same language. It's like Brazil, Portugal, surely we speak the same language, but again, like I said, there's so many layers of meaning. There are layers of meaning, and of course they're not just language, it's not culture, it's also personality, it's family, right? Different families who use different words to mean different things, and so on.
We have different definitions.
Yeah, so in other words, someone lands from another place, and we are all very, especially Brazilian people, can be very eager to get things done and be like, and we often hear the word passionate. Oh, you're so passionate. I've got a bit of a problem with that word, I have to say. Whenever someone says I'm passionate, when I was in my 20s, I was like, oh, thank you. And now someone says I'm passionate, I'm like, I don't know, I think that's a compliment. I think you're just using a euphemism to say that I can be something not that good.
Well, let's define your passion then.
That I actually, anyway, but yeah. So the whole idea of being so eager to get things done, and to you have to take time to absorb the environment and to understand the nuances, and this will come with time. So for me, the difficulty between UK, between Australia, and my understanding about what Australia is, etc., it has been improving over the years, and I'm sure it will continue to evolve. It's like a relationship. People say, oh, any type of relationship, business relationship, romantic relationships, etc., right? It's an ongoing process. The learning process, like on LinkedIn, for all the of us who love, hanging out on that network, as opposed to Instagram, but it's everywhere as well. But anyway, you see people talking about lifelong learning. Well, learning is a process that keeps on going for as long as you're going.
So
So
it's
for as long as you're here,
redundant to say then.
yeah, you're going to be learning something, whether you want. And change is the same thing. Like, change is inevitable, you know. The only certainty is uncertainty, and all those kind of phrases. So I guess that yeah, it's inevitable that with time, as you get more absorbed into a culture, as you get more immersed into this culture, and the culture opens itself up to you as much as you open yourself up to them. It's the listening and the speaking, it's the reading and the writing. You know, they are associated. When you're learning a new language, a foreign language, um, as soon as you start improving your reading, your writing goes with your reading. As soon as you start improving your listening skills, your speaking also goes, and vice versa, because you understand the pronunciation better, and so you can mimic that pronunciation as well. So the more you open yourself up to the culture, because you are understanding the culture, of course, then you will see the culture open itself right up to you, in front of you, because you get more receptive to that as well. That limit of which, you know, you were not you couldn't see before, that you were not aware of, because you couldn't grasp the nuances. You know what I mean?
Yeah, what a
So
wonderful vision that you have regarding how we immerse ourselves in the culture and get to know the culture to be able to understand the culture instead
yeah,
of judging from outside,
yeah,
having all this kind of paranoia that people don't like us, don't like because of our hair or of our color or of our language, but mainly because we don't understand their point of views as well. So we bring what we know, but we are not open to learn more. And the time when you are open to learn and give the time to learn and be able to connect is when the magic happens, right? As you
yeah.
evolve.
Yes, and I think the integration comes with the language as well. Like, with the time, as time goes by, you know, I always joke, for example, whenever I go overseas, and that was one of the first things I did when I became an Australian citizen was, well, I've got this, I gotta go use it, and this meaning my passport. So
Uh-huh.
my first action after becoming a citizen was to get the hell out of Australia. You're like, what? I mean, you've just become a citizen. What are you doing? You know, I'm just like, well, I'm going out there. I'm going to do my walkabout elsewhere, and I'm gonna see.
Yeah.
I'm gonna see what it is like to go around and about. You know, being Australian,
Australia.
right?
Yeah.
And because it's interesting. And then well, of course, I went to Brazil, and then of course my sister joked at the time. She was like, I can't understand how someone spends the whole life in a country, that means Brazil, and gets raised in that country, in that culture, and then for 5 minutes stays somewhere else, becomes a citizen, and now comes back saying, oh, you know, I'm from this other country. And I was like, thank you very much for acknowledging all the efforts and all the journey, by the way. Thank you for integrating the reality. Love you back. Not, no, I'm joking. We're integrated. But at the time, I was like, listen up, young lady. Let me tell you something. You know, and then I explained to her, I said, you know, this is a journey. This is a journey. And yes, I am a citizen of Australia. So yes, I am Australian. And, but then I had to come up with a little, how can I say, I had to adapt the language to suit my audience, because otherwise the audience was getting a little bit, you know, confused. So for my sister, I said to her, you know, I am Australian as well as I am Brazilian, because after all, you know, this is what I'm doing over there, and the country is giving me the opportunities of this and this and that and the other. So yes, I am a citizen of 2 countries now. So yes, and I pay tax in both countries, or you know, I pay no, but you know, that sort of thing. Like, I have a business in both countries, and so on. So that was one of the things. And then the other thing that I said to my sister was also, not to my sister, but when I traveled in Europe, and then, you know, as soon as I would open my mouth and start speaking English, then people would look at me and say, but you know, where are you from again? I'm like, well, you know, I'm Brazilian, but I live in Australia, and I'm Australian as well. So I'm a little Australian in the training, I would say, like that. So I kind of started with these little, which again is like, I'm Brazilian and I'm Australian, period. That's it. I was born in Brazil. Yes, I was raised in Brazil, because I've been in Australia for quite a while, and I consider myself, a citizen of this country as well. But then, depending on who you're talking to, like the other day, a couple of months ago, I was in Bali on holiday, and then of course I started chit-chatting away with someone who was sitting close to me, and the both of them happened to be from Australia. And then when they asked me, where are you from, I said, I'm from Sydney. And then I laughed, and then I made my little joke again. I explained to them that I actually joked with them, and I said to them, the actual truth about this is that I normally say to people that in Brazil I'm from São Paulo, but in Australia I'm from WA, because because that's a little bit of a funny twist to that, as we know. But also it's because this is where I first landed in Australia, Western Australia, and also that's where I became a citizen. So
let's go back to this. Yeah. So when you came and I met you here, I was amazed by your way of communicating and easily speaking, and also writing and explaining your ideas. So we got connected very quickly with the ideas and conversation. And you came here with English, right? And you met the community and saw so many people struggling to get the point that they want to be themselves or do what they know what to do, but not able to. And you saw many people getting stuck in their environment and not going out of their own community, right? And staying, just speaking Portuguese, and not being like very aware that the work that they had to do to grow in Australia. So how was your perception when you came from UK, that has also a Brazilian community, to Australia, where you had the first encounter with the Brazilian community here?
I mean, I think the people who live in the Australian Brazilian community living in Australia will definitely absorb the Australian ways. Brazilian community living in France, in the UK, and so on. That's you kind of you merge with the country and the culture. That's the magic that happens, right? Now, from the point of view of this, staying together, sticking to your own, I definitely feel I feel like in Australia, the sense of community is quite good. Like, I've been to many countries in Europe. Nothing wrong. Love you. All good. But I think that here in Australia, from what I've seen, there is a bigger level of integration and support in general. Not just like Brazilians helping Brazilians, but I think that other people from other communities, they also get together and they also do their thing. Some rely more on their own native language communities than others, and I think this is, again, it's a cultural thing. I'm not sure if the Swedish and the Dutch and the Finnish and Scandinavian, Nordic, don't know if they're so interested in sticking so together. They certain cultures, they have different concepts. They sometimes are more like individual and they're more independent. Latin cultures, they kind of not like this idea of sticking a little. It depends. Like every culture stick together. Like we can't. Like I'm making a few assumptions here, so excuse me there, because I don't know it all at all, right? So, but far from that actually. But what I'm saying is that like it's some people are more like they need to be together over food. They will have that big pot of food to serve. Not every culture likes the big pot to serve the food, right? So different. So that's what I'm trying to say, right? So, and it's not right, it's not wrong. Yeah.
But did you see the difference between what you saw in UK regarding community being more together and not really expand, but more sing together? Because let's come back to what I would like to explain here is most of the time as a newcomer, we feel afraid of exposing ourselves. And of course, it's very safe for us to keep inside of our own communities. But also, we stay so much time inside of our own community that we forget that we are part now with the big community, despite we go to the supermarket, we go to the train station, we start absorbing, as you mentioned, lots of traces of the whole community. But the point is there any difference between behaviors that you see in communities in UK that people can explore more about more outside of their own community than in Australia, or vice versa? Or it's so similar everywhere, especially in the Brazilian community?
Oh, look, I think Brazilian. I mean, I ended up working for a Brazilian magazine over there, and I worked for a Brazilian magazine over here as well. You know, so what I noticed over here. So I found good friendships over there, and I helped. It was the beginning. Sometimes it's the foundation, right? And then over here, I found as well the same kind of level of support in a way. But I felt that over here I think there was maybe a bit more integration in comparison, but we do tend to, it's a natural thing, and we even joke amongst Brazilian circles, like of friends, you throw a party or you have a barbecue, and then there are a few friends from other countries that join, and there are a few friends originally born and raised in the particular city where we're living, so from Sydney and from Perth, and then these friends, they are very loved and dear, especially because, like I'm saying, there's like 20 Brazilians and one person from goodness knows another country, and then one person born and raised in Sydney, for example, right? And then the joke is that we say to that person, so you realize you're going to have to become fluent in Portuguese, right? And that often happens. There's sometimes the case when there are a couple of people there and they are speaking some words in Portuguese, and the Brazilian people are getting away with just saying, yeah, mate, vem cá, or something like that, or whatever it is that they're going to say, it's like, come over here, as opposed to, so it's it's a cultural thing, I think, of Brazilians to kind of get together and be not just Brazilians. I think various cultures.
Latin Americans,
That's the same with Argentinians. I walk around here. There's loads of Argentinians here at the moment in Manly, and then you see them walking around in little. And the thing is, I think it's all good because we need that part of us as well. It's important to have that, and it's also important to make sure that you also keep on integrating. So you have to live, otherwise you create the bubble. And you create the ghetto or whatever. I don't see ghettos. There's no this word is not a word for our culture, I don't think.
Yes, I think that's right. So the being in a way, in a place where we're welcomed from people that you don't know you, but know your culture, and you feel that you are similar to them, it's a relief, especially for people like in your case, you had English, right? You could talk, you could go around. But for people that don't come to a country that they don't have the native language or the local language, they feel isolated. And it's the community that makes that process easier for them, because is where they get the support, they get the ideas, and they feel that they are someone in there. So it is a strong base, let's say, a strong importance that we have communities to help, and especially integrating. Being able to integrate.
Yes, and then I think here in Australia, I mean, if there's anything, I mean, it's very, again, the word that I also found very hard to understand when I first landed here is Australia is very multicultural. And the more I became a citizen of Australia, I actually understood the word multicultural as something more positive than not, which also means that, you have the support from your group, and you can be intact in your originality and your authenticity within your culture and your cultural interest, your music, your food, and it's all allowed to be exactly like that. You don't even have to merge. you can integrate in that way. So someone else can come and try a food. Someone else can, but when I first arrived here, I was very focused in thinking about the concept of culture from a few different sociological and anthropological lines of thought. So for me, I was like, well, but culture already implies that many cultures have merged and then so on and so forth. But then I went and I read more about it, and then I was like, okay, I understand that. Because for me, I mean, like, and then I came up with this analogy in the very beginning. I was like, oh, Brazilian culture is a bit, because we've had our migration cycles earlier or further away, like back in the day. So we've all, of course, integrated in a way that even a few things probably got a bit lost, I suppose. And so I used to joke and say, oh, Brazil is like a smoothie. You can taste the different flavors, but you can't say, oh, take the grapes away from here because I don't like grapes. You know what I mean? Like, oh my God, I can taste papaya. Take the papaya from here. No, it's a smoothie. You're going to taste everything. You either drink the whole smoothie or there's no
And
smoothie.
sometimes the taste comes different anyway.
So you can, so that was my thing. I was like, oh, Brazilian culture, migration cycles, etc. Maybe more consolidated. I'm not sure. And so it's like a smoothie. And then I was like, well, Australian is like a fruit salad. I was like, oh, Australian culture is more like a fruit salad, which is you have the multiculturalism, you can see the different cultures. And then for me, at the time when I first arrived, I was like, I'm not sure if I like that, because that means that you can see everything so differently. And then the multi can also become a way of segregation. And you can say, oh, I don't like this, so I'm not going to. But then again, that was my own internal bias. Because
that's it, baby.
So because in fact, what that was giving is like, you know what, you can integrate without merge, like without necessarily getting squashed and changing into something else that you're not. You can still be this plus that, and that's us, and we are Australian.
I'm so glad that you got that moment, the aha moment in your life, because exactly is this, is we are so rich in different cultures, but we don't need to change what we are to be able to fit something if you don't like it. No, you need to understand to be able to be there and accept. So it's very difficult to live in a place where you don't accept the way we live. So otherwise you get away from that. You don't do it, you move away. So the importance of being aware that where you are, what you do, and how you see things are very palatable for you, that you can really deal day by day with the situation. Otherwise, that's why we migrate because you want something else.
And then here you have something else, so let's appreciate what we have. And like, it's very interesting for me very recently, including because of the work that I've been doing with, in general. I ended up meeting various people from other countries who are just here for a quick visit and just working here. And they are, because here in Australia we have people from all nationalities and they become citizens eventually, so we are all Australians, right? And yes, Australia has a culture. I love how people say sometimes, Australia. I was like, no, I'm not even gonna go there. But but it was an interesting thing, because I've heard a lot of these people that I met recently saying like, oh no, because in my country we do this is like that, and I said, well, guess what? We're in Australia.
That's right, baby. You are in Australia.
So we're here in Australia. You know what I mean? So yeah, but this and that and the other. I was like, yeah, that's cool. That's not a problem. That's all good. But
yeah.
And so certain things that were being like really like, oh, because we should do this. I was like, well, but over here.
Oh, this should is always something. It should.
What is right? What is wrong? And like and anyway, it's all things considered.
Look, now I want to ask you something.
Yeah, go for it.
You came first to WA and you had your time in Perth. And by the time that you came, you're still working with journalism and doing publicity. So how was for you as career-wise your transition from Brazil, UK, and Perth, and how was for you your journey find jobs in your field? Was something easy because you had the language, not easy because you didn't know anyone, or despite the heavier language? How was this situation for you career-wise?
It was, of course, it was challenging. Probably not as challenging as, like the fact that I had the English language, the fact that I managed to, study a master's, all those things. I had already had work experience in Brazil, for a fair bit of years, and working with multinational companies. I think all those things helped a bit. However, it's a new place. Over here, as we know, very often it's about what you've done here, because everybody comes from a different place. And then if everybody is coming with a different standard from a different place with what they've done, it's kind of like, how do you measure? So for us all to be able to be equal, the whole rule, which is the rule that was one of the hardest things to come to terms with, is that, well, we need to know what you've done. But to be honest, we don't care what you've done there, and over there, because we're all here now, and over here it's flat.
You need
so
local experience.
What are you gonna do over here? So there's and I can say, I mean, of course, I mean, it's not exactly like that. It depends. If you're a super ultra good at what you do in wherever country, I mean, that's obvious that it's going to be recognized, etc., etc. However, what I'm saying here, you can't have a criteria that is equal for everybody if you're taking certain things into consideration for certain people and certain things for other people. And for everybody to have the same equal opportunity, you have to kind of flatten it all, and go, well, great, you've done all these great things there. It sounds like you got potential, but over here you haven't done anything, so this is what I've got for you. So I would like to say, it's like I had to eat some sand.
Okay.
But all in all, I've been given good opportunities. But then also it's about what you set yourself to do as well. So Perth for me was like, oh, Claudia, do you want to be in Perth or in Sydney? So in the beginning for me, it was like, well, you know what? It's best for me to stay in Perth, because in Perth it's like being a small fish. Oh no, sorry, a big fish in a small pond. That's what, when I had my first career mentor, trying to chat to and all of it, it's like, that's the conversation. It's like, well, fair enough, you can go to Sydney, but or you can stay in Perth. There's some opportunities here, and so on. So this is also something that I've seen you say, and this is something that I say to my new friends who are coming from a different country and who are trying, especially from Brazil, and then they're trying to find their feet in Australia. Very often I say to them, I said, well, Sydney and Melbourne, they are incredible cities, but guess what? Cairns is great, Perth is great, Adelaide is great. And then people are going to watch this and say, Claudia, what are you talking about? And I'm saying, I'm talking about the fact that I've got some good friends of mine who decided to go regional, and they have succeeded. So they gave to the country, and the country gave back to them.
That's right. And it's happening right now.
Trade-off. That's the trade-off. It's like, the whole conversation about pathways and so on, they're real. Now, and I've got friends in the Northern Territory as well, in Darwin and so on. I mean, is it for everybody? No, it's not for everybody. And but there is that opportunity. I know of stories of people who went to Tasmania, opened a business in Tasmania, and then so on. And so does that make sense?
Yes. And then moving to Sydney, after living in WA, as you said, you are from WA. So how was for you leaving the small pond and being a big fish to then go to a big pond and be a small fish?
Again, much like we talked about, I mean, once again, the processes, and then you bring your transferable skills. It's about building the network again, or starting the network even before you leave, and that's the strategy that I've used most of the times, of always like networking online. Like I've been on LinkedIn for 16 years. I saw it the other day. I was like, oh, great. That's a really good statistics. I've got another not so good statistics about another app, which I'm not going to talk about because it's not a professional app. So, but 16 years on, 16 years on LinkedIn. So that's a funny one. So yeah, you have to build your network again, and you have to find your groove, find your crowd, find your space, your suburb. What is it that you connect with, or the aspects of your life. Do you want to be close to the beach? Do you want to be close to the creative suburbs? Where you want to, what can you afford really? That's also like the practical questions as well. Are you willing to start off doing something that is not exactly like a senior position? Do you want to start off working in a more junior position in your career? Or do you want to, one thing that happened to me when I moved to Sydney for this, I think it was for the first time maybe, or the second time I've moved to Sydney, second or third. Yeah, I think it was maybe the second time that I moved to Sydney. I was stressing out a recruiter so much because I wanted a job that she offered me a job to work at the recruitment agency. Because I was like, but oh my God, like if I don't get a job soon, I mean, like it's going to be really difficult for me. And plus, I mean, you're a large recruitment agency. You've got, branches everywhere else. And I mean, I'm sure you have a job for me because I've got all these skills. I mean, there must be a client that would be willing to hire me, even if it's for freelance for a short period of time. And by the way, I don't recommend being so annoying, but not exactly. It's not something that people appreciate here.
Save this for something else.
You don't like it, yeah? We over here in Australia, we like to be left alone and we like to do our thing and
great point.
And go and enjoy the sunshine when we can, or enjoy whatever it is that we want to enjoy. But let's just do you work to live or do you live to work kind of thing, like meaning there are reasons why Australia is considered one of the countries in the world that has the highest quality of life. And one of the reasons is because if you want to have a coffee, sometimes you have to have the coffee before 2:00 in certain places. Because if you don't have a coffee before 2:00,
you can go home and do it at home.
There will be no coffee for you. And the reason is because there is someone who makes the coffee, and that person needs to rest as well. And also people need to sell the wine. So if you want to have a coffee after 2, you might as well have a wine at 3 or 4 or 9 o'clock.
That's a good point. So Claudia, tell me something now, getting into your career, because then you migrated from being a journalist in publicity and moving into innovation, business development. And one thing that you mentioned to me before is that people is still seeing you as the journalist, and you have been transitioning or moving to this new, not so new field, but people look at you as the Claudia journalist. I believe you have been a wonderful journalist that people cannot forget your work.
Thank you. I'll take that. I will take compliments. Why not? I mean, what's his name? Dale Carnegie. They say don't praise, but that's okay. Thank you, Sam. But the thing about journalism and advertising and production, digital production and business transformation strategy and all that sort of thing, design thinking, service design, etc. Right? Different worlds. But the thing, well, there are a few things there. But what I tend to say as well when I'm talking to friends that are new to this, I say there is a lag, jet lag. Mm-hmm. So when you move, sometimes depending on how that process is going, one thing is if you've been transferred, someone has a role somewhere in New York and that person gets pulled and allocated over here to do a particular job. That's one thing, but still there is a lag. There's still a cultural lag, and there's actually a really good book about that that I can let you know about later because I forgot the name now. But the thing is, there is this lag. So until you can bring all yourself into the country and all yourself into the job, or it takes a while. So there are detours, for whatever the reasons that may be. Maybe you're not in the city where your market is booming, for example.
Yeah.
For example, in Perth, like Perth is Perth, WA. There's a lot of mining there. But there's also a lot of creative services there, more so nowadays. But obviously, there's less than in Melbourne, and so on. And so for some reason, you need to bring yourself together, and that movement takes time. So in my particular case, the people who see me still as a journalist more than anything else are the people, say, for example, from my childhood in Brazil, and they're still my friends, and people from my family. Sometimes they haven't absorbed what I've done over here over the years, also because they're not here. So they only hear what I say, and they hear a little bit. So for them, I'm a journalist. So, I was doing this coverage of the event recently here for Brazilian TV channel, and then everybody was congratulating me. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, I've had so many jobs here. Some of them were pretty, difficult to get and really amazing. And nobody said a thing. Mass media, and in Brazil, people are so focused on that sort of thing. Oh my God, it's television, blah, blah, blah. So more than here, I would even say. So again, it's about the integration of the self, which goes back again into the conversation about you stay with your community, but you still make friends. So when I started my life in Perth, I had multiple, say, personalities, or I was wearing sometimes multiple hats. I was working as a brand ambassador. Sometimes I was working at the shop, at an aromatherapy shop, and then I was working at working as an individual independent producer for musicians in Perth, who were my friends as well. So in that environment, I could sort of bring sort of my full self, where I'm bringing my capabilities that I studied, the skills that I've developed, and the things that I like. And then in the other jobs, I was making my day-to-day money, and I was observing and absorbing the culture. And there's always something that you can get from that. And I think that sort of level of flexibility towards change, which can be painful because it's so uncomfortable, it's the kind of thing that helps the most in the adaptation. The sooner you can get over yourself. How many times have I heard that in my life? Oh my God, I think you're gonna hear that again after this recording. But it's
Oh, Claudia.
Claudia, get over yourself. You need to get over yourself to discover your new self. And I know it's going to sound a bit like, but
no, wait a minute. Let's stop here, because then comes the chapter. As last time when I met you coming back from Brazil in early 2018.
Oh my God, that was so fun. On the same plane. What a coincidence.
What a coincidence. Like, I spent the whole trip talking about things, and
so good.
And you telling me about, so you had a transformation, because suddenly I see Claudia becoming so fascinated about self-development and yoga, and going to India to do the course. And then there is a new narrative in there that I was like, I need to observe this.
Yeah.
So what motivated you to go toward that pathway in parallel to your life as working and doing everything, and living a very busy life, and having the time to dedicate to meditate, yoga, and even do a yoga course in India?
Yeah, and I've been talking about this even today, actually, which is like, I used a friend of mine used the expression to break the circuits. Or to break a cycle, you can even say, or to, like, if there's a circuit that's going in loop, it's like, it's
the rat wheel, right?
Yeah. What? Sorry.
The rat wheel, like you are just all the time running.
And when you go into a loop as well, and so you feel that you have the impression that you might be stuck, So it's like, what can you change? Because if you change something systemically, everything else around it will reorganize itself as well. Yeah. So I guess in my case at the time, I was reaching my 10th anniversary in Australia. So it's like a big date. It's like, oh my God, realization station. I've been here for 10 years. It's going to be 10 years, and I'm, like, what am I going to do?
Approaching 40 as well.
Like get your list, of like should and could and would and whatever, all those lists of like
must.
all those wonderful things that, afterwards you go, yeah, whatever, because I mean, whatever really, because what you can do, you can do. What you can't do, you can't do. You did the best you could at the time, and then now it's a time to do better if you want it right now, right? So I was in that process, and I just went, I might as well just take a break. I had this, this inspiration for traveling. It was like, I haven't actually seen Australia in 10 years. Like, I haven't been to the Great Barrier Reef in 10 years. I mean, what? You haven't been to the Great Barrier Reef and you've been in Australia for 10 years? What have you been doing? I'm like, how about working? How about living? How about living? I've been living in Australia. I've been having a life in Australia and my holidays overseas, which is, again, another identity thing. It's only more in these recent years that I've been enjoying saying more yes to here and a little bit of no's other, or taking different times to do different things. And it's the juggling that we have to do when you move overseas. You have to make certain choices, so I've made many times the choice to just go in and spend holidays with my family in Brazil, and that implies that I've missed Australian summers very often, and I have also missed traveling around Australia, because in my particular case I didn't come in as a backpacker, so I didn't do the whole traveling and going, oh, I love this place, I'm going to stay here. So I was like, you know what? Okay, first things first, let's do a little bit of a trip. So I went to, and then did the whole thing, like Great Barrier Reefs and Cairns, and traveled with a couple of friends that way. And then eventually I was like, okay, I'm going to take off again, and I'm going to do a bit of an exploration and think if I want to spend my whole conversation was like, where do I want to spend my next 10 years? And then I came back. So, but in my doing that exploration, I had found yoga in 2015. Here we go. I was living in Kirribilli at the time, and I used to go to Bondi quite a lot. And then I can hear people laughing, because I know that people always talk about Brazilians going to Bondi or Brazilians going to Manly Northern beaches, and I'm
like Brazilians going to Scarborough here.
Exactly. So anyway, there I was in Bondi, and of course I got bitten by the yoga bug, this whole like, hipsterish, I don't know, like hippie chic, whatever. And then people were like, oh, Claudia, I think you should try yoga. It's it might be good for you. And for me, yoga came into my life in a moment where I thought that I wanted things to change, and I was tired with how things were going on in my personal life, and I was also tired about how things were going in my professional life. And then once again, the whole idea of like, how do you break the cycle? You got to do something different. And then the famous phrase, if you always do what you've always done, you always get what you've always gotten. And then this is something that I kept hearing from people over here. So take notes. Language, post-cultural lesson. If you always do what you've always done, you always get what you've always gotten. So, and I was like, okay, I'll do something different. I was like, but I hate yoga, this whole thing. I mean, it's not for me. Seriously, oh yeah, namaste. I was like, I'm a passionate person. No, I'm not a passionate person, but I am a passionate person. So I was like, seriously, I have no time for this. But I just went and I said, okay, fair, I'll try. I'll give it a go. And then I gave it a go. So that was in 2015. And 2 years later, that's when I went traveling. And I figured it was a good self-development, a good way to immerse myself into a different culture as well over there, and put things into perspective. And then you figure out that all the conversations about mindfulness and everything, they do come from there. But in terms of like how that connects the dots, I suppose, I mean, I wouldn't have gone past the pandemic times if I hadn't had yoga, for example, for sure. In my particular case, it helped me. Maybe for other people, it wouldn't help. But for me, it really helped me, because it helped me to kind of like find my own voice and my own ground, and, be comfortable with the uncomfortable, because people go, oh my God, yoga is boring. Well, guess what? If you think it's boring, you should go try it.
Oh yeah. If you
Well,
think it's easy,
I'm
no,
not
you
flexible.
don't, you don't
Yeah.
burn calories, go there and do one.
Yes, it's like, oh, I'm not flexible. I'm like, okay, go try it. Oh, I hate meditating. No, that's for you. Go try it. And then, but regardless of what it is, it's again about the change, and it's about putting yourself in a situation or in a place where you don't like you are a foreigner, let's say. And then once you overcome the difficulties of that foreign environment, which is for someone who's like, oh, I was like, no, I much prefer like doing cardio. And people are like, yeah, Claudia, but yoga, cardio, it's not the same thing, Yoga is not even, it's not the gym. Did you know that? And I'm like, uh, so when you overcome those challenges, then that's when going back to the point, you kind of like, you get over yourself, and you give way to a new possibility for your own self. And then in doing so, the reflection of that is that you might do the same thing in regards to your job, and in regards to your relationship, in your personal relationship. Like, you're going to allow something different to happen because you yourself you're allowing something different to happen to yourself. So it's a bit of a reflective sort of, so that was the connecting the dot for me. Once I managed to see that I was in the groove of yoga, I started being in the groove of other things that um, I was resisting. So, as the yoga teacher would say, do not resist, observe the thoughts, let your body do the job. You're not here to try hard on anything. Allow. And
To
then,
fight, not to fight. You are here to allow the things.
yeah. And then I suppose, if you can apply that mechanism, that same framework, if you want to put it like that, or that same mindset, you can take that elsewhere.
That's
So
right.
when a conversation becomes difficult and you get triggered by some recruiter that asks a question to you, such as, it looks like you've done so much in your life. You've done PR, you've done journalism, you're working in project management, and but what is it really that you really, really like? And I'm just like, how about the fact that it's not like I've chosen to do all these things. I was making the best of all the possibilities. But then you don't.
Some of the things, Claudia, you chose. You chose. Don't give the random what happened. It happened. No, you chose.
Accountability. And so when someone asks you that question, which is a bit of it's a good question. Let's give them. That's the good attitude. You just give them like, you know what? Instead of going, whoa, you goes, okay, fair point. Let me get back to you on this one.
It's something happened. The 2 points. One is the yoga for me was very transformational because I always like it, but when I was younger, I had this kind of you need to meditate, and if you don't meditate, you are not good, And then I spent like my back would hurt, and I was feeling so frustrated until when I learned. Probably in 2011, 12, when I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, that I could not move, and the only thing that I wanted is to have a movement.
Yeah.
And was my personal development route in there. And I remember going to America for one of my courses, and I spent a month in there, and they had an upgrade. Like when I arrived at the hotel for the course, they gave me an upgrade for a presidential suite because no one was in there. It was summer, no one goes to like the what's the name of the place? I even forgot. So everyone was on there. So I got this beautiful, beautiful bedroom with a lounge and everything, and doors to all the deserts and everything. And because I had classes very early for the course, I could not go to the yoga, and I didn't have a car, so I was far, far away. So I started doing yoga by myself. And it was one of the most interesting moments of my life, being able to look into the mirror and see myself in different ways doing yoga. So, and by myself, no one around, and not having the groove of a teacher or anything, but knowing, doing what I knew about and getting to know more. So it was amazing. And the other thing was also the transformation of deciding to leave jobs that I had before, and people doing the same thing, asking, but you have done so many things. You are doing, what do you really do? So I remember once going to my job at Fremantle Hospital, and I used to
Mhm.
get the train and walk from the train station to the hospital, and was a bookstore, second hand bookstore, Elizabeth. I don't know if you remember that. And then I got into the store, and I was looking the books to buy some books, and then I saw this book called One Life, Multiple Careers. And I said,
Yeah.
this is me. So I bought the book, came back home in the train, reading and digesting everything. I said, yes, I'm not wrong, because I had this kind of idea that I was wrong, because I liked so many things and I want to do so many things. But people were just criticizing me all the time because I didn't have something that I was like specifically one thing to do.
Mm.
And it was overwhelming for me having these attacks all the time. And then I found myself and was like, okay, allowing myself to use everything that I can to contribute. Whatever it is, whatever I'm doing, I am always contributing. So that's my transformation, came as not feeling down, because I could do so many things. So,
Exactly. You can. That's a very interesting. Yes, and I've seen the multiple semas,
yeah.
multiple hats, and there is a common thread, which is exactly what you're saying. It's like you're a connector. You are also a communicator. You are someone who enjoys contributing. You're always contributing. You're gregarious. You get that. Yeah. So there's all this. Yeah, and the thing is, there's an integration. There is definitely integration. In the
Integration is one of the words. So,
yeah
Claudia, for us to finish here, I'd like to ask you something.
yeah.
So, you said you go back to Brazil at a certain point of time. You just had your holidays overseas. So, have you ever thought coming back to Brazil and live there?
Oh my God, have I ever thought? Have I ever not thought? Shall we just
Let's
rephrase?
say, when I never thought this.
Not thought about going back to Brazil, you know? And again, this is like, again, that's another hour of conversation or more. But one thing I will say, the and this is something that in the self-development path, and including talking to a counselor and coach, and also all sorts of people, including talking to you multiple times, let's just put it out there, all the conversations with you as well, and with some of our friends in common who are for me mentors as well, so much like you've always been to me as well, coach and mentor in different at different times for different capacities. And I think that when we have when you have the nuclear family overseas, yeah, and then you haven't still built your own family here, you're still in transit with that. There's always this reference of the other place, and also because you create these different worlds, then all of a sudden you got to be cautious, because it's a very common thing to do. Oh, something doesn't work quite well here, so I might as well just go there. And then something's not working quite well over there, I might as well just and then you keep on doing that, and then the reality of it is that it's about commitment as well. You have to commit, I suppose. Commit to the challenges, and commit to the good things, and also and appreciate. So I think that the flirting with going back, and the whole thing about what is home, and then this is another phrase that is a phrase that you come to Australia, you will see that somewhere like written, home is where your heart is. But that becomes a little difficult, because nowadays our hearts is that your heart can be everywhere, right?
Huge heart.
So
Compartmentalized
um,
heart.
and the whole thing about it's so like your home, like that's for one thing, that also helps a bit, because you're the one who integrates everything. So when I do that, I sort of like feel more like I am integrating everybody. It's like if I'm helping, whatever with whatever I'm doing the best I can. I am in a way, one way or another, I'm honoring my parents wherever they are, and then wherever I come from, and I'm contributing, and the generations to come as well. Mine, no other people's. I'm playing a role, whatever the role. If I follow what I believe to be a good ethics in different areas of my life, then without being a good Samaritan, really, because I mean, we're multifaceted and we're humans, I mean, we make mistakes and so on. But what I'm trying to say is that, yeah, there's a never, the way, for me, this whole idea of going back has not ended yet. I still dwell on it. But nowadays, much like dwelling on a yoga lesson with like, oh my God, I can't do this pose. Oh my God, this is so boring or annoying or whatever it is, the conversation. I just listen to this, oh, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. And what I come back to is like, you need to be grateful also for what you're achieving and what you have here as well. It needs, this attachment that we have towards the family and or whatever, or the jobs, or how can you be grateful for what it is at the moment, and what you've achieved, and what the country that you're living in has given to you. And for me, that was a really good example, because I often do hear people say to me, oh, because if you would go back, you would this, you would that, and the other. And I'm like, oh, I'm not so sure about that. So there's this idealistic view of there's no, because again, it's like when I think there's again a go back to the whole language and how we choose to express things. There is not a going back. There's no going back. What there is a starting again. So going back to your country.
It's different, right?
Yes, going back to your country of origin after you've been living overseas for such a long time is as good as pretty much migrating again. Because and this becomes very, very clear after you've been living in a country for such a long time, like we have been, and then there's a lot more time to come. And then in 20 years' time, this conversation will be funny to watch, because we're going to say other things.
Maybe.
Yes, I can't wait.
Where we'll be living.
Evolution, even. But the thing is, when you when you start again, like, it's a new, you've absorbed all these things, you've become all this other person, and then there is the other leg, which is the leg of going where you were born, going back, let's say, but like returning or restarting, resetting from where you were born, but bringing everything else that you've already lived. So, change is inevitable. You've already changed. So there's no such thing as going back. There's like the river goes in that particular way. You know what I mean? Like the river goes in that particular way. My mom is calling me and I'm here talking to you. And she's
I let you go, Siri.
Stop. Mom, I'll call you back.
I let you go. So, Claudia, it's amazing. So we have every time when you talk, you laugh so much because you have so many things to talk about, and from philosophy to business. So we go through the whole spectrum of possibilities that we can talk about and laugh. So for 13 hours that we have, like you had in the airport or traveling, we could talk without stopping. So wonderful. Yeah. So, and I have been telling you to come to give me this moment talking with you, that I would like to know your journey, because I know your journey is very rich, different. But I know you have been through roller coasters, right? Going up and down, and it's showing people that independent who you are, we always, as human beings, is life. We have ups and downs that bring us to where we are and doing what we do. So an inspiration to people to see that anything is possible. So you moved from a career that was so well established in journalism and publicity to become what you're doing now, talking about design thinking. That is something very late to journalists. They have the thinking, they have the curiosity to know and find the real, where this information comes from and what is possible to do with this information, informing people, inform them to decide better. So design thinking is also in there, but was not called design thinking before. And it's so related to business. So it's amazing to see how you came to the point where you're now using your transferable skills and putting everything together and contribute with any business out there wanting to succeed and grow and provide services to their clients. So well done. Well done.
And thank you. And I think I probably just one final thing, I guess, just to wrap. And I think, yeah, that I one of the things that stuck with me from a couple of conversations with one of my former managers was about people just being people, right? Sometimes we put this big thing like, oh, and we're getting embarrassed about either talking or interviewing someone, or even like, going and ordering a coffee in another language because, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to be making a mistake, or, oh, I'm going to speak to this very important person, inverted commas. And it's kind of like, no, it's just a person, like you, like me. We're just people, really.
Right. So, Claudia, thank you very much for coming and sharing your life career journey. And I wish you all the best in any situation, any new adventure that you get in, and the continuity of your self-development as well. So, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
So for you that have watched this episode, thank you very much for staying here with us. Remember to subscribe to the channel to get all the premieres, and see you next. Bye-bye. Bye, Claudia.